Hey, it's good to see you. Yeah, how's your day? It's okay. I was pretty tired this morning, but I got up. The library is so quiet right now. Like, I feel weird talking to you. Like, okay, yeah. Well, come on, have a seat, yeah. Yeah, no, totally. I thought about what you said, and I think I can totally tutor you on bio a little bit. I feel like I'm only good enough to tutor you when it comes to like the ecology side and like, the fauna and kind of like behavior and anatomy and stuff. Is that okay? Okay, cool. That's very generous, thank you. I also just want to help my friend, so yeah. But we can use this really cool book here. Called The Encyclopedia of Animals, a complete visual guide. So, I've sort of highlighted some things that our professor has put on the study guide. I've gone through this book a lot, so I was kind of able to narrow it down a little bit. There is a giant table of contents. And look at this first image. I know, right? It's so cool. Alright, so let's go to the places that I dog-eared. Let's see. Okay, so importantly, on the exam, he did say there's going to be a section on sort of arid environments and the creatures that live there and how they have adapted to those conditions. So let's look at this page. Deserts and semi-deserts. Okay, ready? Yeah, maybe grab your notebook, grab a pen. Okay. These habitats, which cover about 1/3 of the planet's land surface, are characterized by a lack of moisture. This is caused by high evaporation or low precipitation rates, or a combination of both. The deserts average less than 10 inches of rain per year, while semi-arid habitats receive 10 to 20 inches annually. Precipitation is typically sporadic and unpredictable. Most of the world's driest areas lie between 15 and 40 degrees north and south of the equator. Searing daytime temperatures are common but do not define these habitats. They frequently experience freezing overnight temperatures. Much of the Antarctic, which is bitterly cold year-round, fits the definition of a desert. Yeah, he mentioned that sort of at the very tail end of lecture last week, so make sure that you remember that for the test. It's probably going to be a trick question. Like, can Antarctica be, like, classified as a desert area? Yeah, exactly. So key things that you should probably write down are going to be, I'm guessing, the amount of inches that deserts average and the amount of inches that semi-arid habitats average. Yeah, so for deserts, it's less than 10 inches. For semi-arid areas, it's 10 to 20 inches. And then also just that area around the equator, 15 and 40 degrees north and south of the equator. That's going to be important too. Okay, so these animals have desert adaptation strategies, right? Yeah, so we have kind of like a gazelle-like creature called a gemsbok. superbly adapted to extreme heat. When it pants, the rapid inflow and outflow of air passes over a fine network of blood vessels, cooling the flow of blood to the brain. The gemsbok feeds mostly at night when the moisture in plant matter is at its greatest. To help it walk on shifting sands, it has splayed feet that give it grip and prevent it from sinking. Yeah. No, I agree. It's really cool. It's definitely something out of, like, Star Wars, you know. But yeah, here's the image of it if you want to see it again. So write down the splayed feet to help prevent sinking and the cooling of blood to the brain. Those are probably most important. Okay, for snakes, we have a sideways move. This happens so that the snake can move over surfaces such as loose sand and soft mud. So they adapt a locomotion method known as sidewinding. The snake uses a point of contact with the ground as purchase, then lifts its trunk clear of the ground to secure another point of contact. Shown here is a Paraguay's desert adder sidewinding its way across a dune in the Namib Desert of Africa. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, so I just say, like, write down the word sidewinding and just maybe, like, put a definition by it. Okay. So let's go on to another biome, mountains and highlands. Mountains are like terrestrial islands. The process of evolution often occurs in isolation, so that the animals on one mountain can be unique from those of other mountains, even those located nearby. Life in the mountains, however, always displays a layered pattern to its structure, mainly because the climatic conditions alter with altitude. Air gets colder, for example, with increasing elevation, so that even tropical mountains such as Mount Kenya and Mount Kilimanjaro, both in Africa, can be permanently capped with snow. Agility is a feature of large mountain animals such as the chamois in Europe and the snow leopard in Asia. The smaller animals often shelter from environmental extremes in burrows and hibernate in winter. So the elevational gradient is what's going to be most important here. It causes an insane degree of biodiversity on, like, mountainous areas because you just have these different elevations coming, like, one right after another, and so you get animals that have very specific niches and you get a lot of biodiversity. He's definitely going to ask you about that. Let's see. We can just move on to tundra now. True tundra is one of the hardest and least biologically diverse habitats. A vast, treeless northern hemisphere world north of 55 degrees latitude covering 1/5 of Earth's land surface. Very little snow or rain falls and nutrients are scarce. During the long, bitterly cold winters, unbroken darkness endures for months and the ground remains frozen to a depth of at least 10 inches. Summers are exceptionally short. The sun shines 24 hours a day. The upper permafrost melts, and shallow ephemeral lakes form in the wet ground. Migratory insects, birds, and mammals move in to take advantage of this very limited growing season. So yeah, I'd put the lack of nutrients and the lack of precipitation. You can kind of think of the desert in parallel with that. But also these interesting differences in sunlight. So summers are very short, during which the sun shines 24 hours a day, the upper permafrost melts, and shallow ephemeral lakes form in the wet ground. That's crazy. That's awesome. So yeah, short summers, weird seasons, weird days sometimes, lack of nutrients. Alright, here's the next page. We're continuing with biomes. Alright, so first, polar regions. Antarctica is the coldest, windiest, driest continent, and the Arctic is almost as inhospitable. Despite this, a surprising level of animal life is able to survive at the poles. The Arctic Ocean, for example, supports some of the world's most productive fisheries, while in Antarctica, Wilson's storm petrel is a bird that breeds in millions. Extreme cold is the main driver of animal adaptations. Thick layers of fat and fur or feathers help prevent heat loss in mammals and birds. Often the mammals migrate seasonally to avoid the harshest conditions. Many fishes and invertebrates are protected by a natural antifreeze in their body fluids. That's so important. Again, the prof really likes adaptations and specific adaptations for specific creatures. So definitely talk in more general levels. Make sure you note down that cold is the driver of adaptations, right? Like struggle and that sort of like push toward natural selection where you have differential fitness. You need some sort of struggle there for fitness to be differential. Not everybody can survive, essentially. It drives adaptation. Write down thick layers of fat, fur, feathers, and then seasonal migration. Okay. Lakes and ponds. Some 5 million lakes and many more ponds are scattered across the continents. The older they are, the more biodiverse they tend to be, and the more endemic species they contain. Most pond and lake fauna falls into 3 distinct categories. Zooplankton live mainly in the surface waters and are tiny animals such as crustaceans and rotifers. Nekton includes fishes and some large invertebrates that consume zooplankton and live throughout the water column. They also feed on benthic animals, mostly invertebrate bottom dwellers, such as insects, crustaceans, and mollusks. Most ponds and lakes also have animals living on and in surrounding vegetation and bake sediments. So, down here in this information box, it says the Pantanal is a haven for one of South America's greatest concentrations of wildlife, home to more than 600 bird species. In the wet season, it becomes the world's largest freshwater wetland. So I point this one out specifically because he did mention that in lecture, I think it was like 2 Wednesdays ago. This was just one of the examples he pointed out, so I kind of flagged it for you. He's probably going to put it on the test, so write that down. Okay, he didn't really spend a lot of time on seas and oceans or mangroves. Let's see. Urban ecology. This is important to him. It's going to be on the test. All right, here's the page. Urban areas. In urban habitats, humans and their activities are dominating forces. Upper levels of food chains, for example, are controlled by people and their domesticated animals, such as dogs and cats. Such factors can combine to ensure that the animal life of urban areas is comprised of a small number of species with many individuals. Animals with opportunistic or wide-ranging diets and shelter requirements abound, including sparrows, pigeons, rats, cockroaches, and other insects. So, quick sidebar. Opportunistic, wide-ranging diets and shelter requirements, they can shelter in lots of places. They can eat a lot of things. They're not sort of like confined to one type of food or one type of shelter, so they're more easily able to survive in an environment that's changing a lot and that's likely very different from ancestral, like instinctive, instincts that they may have. All right, let's continue. Those animals with boom or bust population cycles tend to do particularly well. However, species with naturally low reproductive rates rarely survive. Nor do those with narrow habitat requirements or those sensitive to air and water pollution, such as many frogs. So that makes sense, right? That's pretty intuitive. If you're an animal and you have very narrow habitat requirements, when the habitat changes, when your ecosystem changes, it's going to be really hard for you to survive. Whereas if you're an animal with sort of a wide range of those requirements, the change, so your range could be this cone, and the change kind of takes you from equilibrium over here or over here, but it's still within the cone. So maybe write that down as a diagram in your notes. Right. Urban ecology. Great. Okay. I think that's all for that one unit. I know I had a dog ear over here. This book is so thick, it's very difficult to... Okay, yes, so this was a very big part of one of his lectures. You were there, right? You'll recognize this because it was like, it took up like 30 minutes. He just used a ton of examples, and he's really into this stuff because he is an ornithologist by training, so that makes sense. Let's get into it. Evolution of bills. The size and shape of birds' bills vary, adapted to their diets and food gathering methods. It was Charles Darwin who first offered convincing proof that such physical features are not immutable and that species change over time in response to their environments. So immutable means unchanging, cannot change. So Charles Darwin proved that that's not true. Animals can change and adapt to environments. He theorized that Galapagos Island finches, which differed most noticeably in terms of bill size and shape, were all descended from a common ancestor and had evolved to exploit different ecological niches that were not being filled by other animals. Genetic mutations that helped certain birds thrive were more likely to be passed on to successive generations. This adaptive radiation is like, you start like here on like, say you have like a tree diagram of like adaptations and characteristics. You start here and you just spread outward like this. This adaptive radiation is most noticeable on remote islands where outside influences and competitor species are almost absent. Alright, so this is pretty important. The whole Darwin's finches thing is something that he likes to reference a lot in his graphs when he shows which birds with different beaks survive better during the drier seasons versus the wetter seasons. Remember the analogy, or not the analogy, but the example where when it was a really dry season, the birds with it was the birds with the super long, sharp bills that survived better because they could crack open seeds. But when it was the opposite, it was the shorter billed birds because they could kind of get into like grooves and stuff. Alright, yes, isolated habitats. Hawaii, Galapagos Islands, Madagascar. Let's see, I want to give you just the important things and not overwhelm you. Okay, let's do this. A rainbow of differences. The Hawaiian honeycreepers belong to the subfamily Drepanidae, which includes more than 30 species, many of them now extinct, that look and behave very different from each other, despite the fact that they all trace their lineage back to a single species. So that's, again, like adaptive radiation, like... The honeycreeper's ancestors are most likely Eurasian rose finches that flew 2,500 miles across open ocean, possibly with the aid of storm winds, to settle on this volcanic archipelago millions of years ago. Many honeycreepers evolved bills that fit into certain types of flowers. The pictured Hawaiian honeycreepers are a series of species. You won't need to know that, but here they are pictured. So this makes intuitive sense, right? Like birds are going to need different beaks depending on what they're pollinating. So like this really curved beak is obviously a flower that has a very curved shape to it, whereas this one likely eats seeds. This one likely eats seeds too, and this one's probably like a inside a flower bird as well. Honestly, he might have a picture on the exam where you want to kind of just use your intuition to like figure out what they likely eat or pollinate. So just be aware of that. Okay, I think there was one more thing that I wanted to go over with you today, and then we can work on the English class together if you want. Yes. Okay. So we're going to look a little bit at insects this unit so it included the different biomes, the Darwin's finches experiment, and then he talked a lot about like invertebrates and stuff, and like sensory stuff. So we're gonna go into it here. Here's the page. Okay, let's get into it. Insect allies. Hexapods are arthropods with 6 legs and a body divided into 3 parts: head, thorax, and abdomen. The vast majority of hexapods are insects, but there are also 3 classes of non-insect hexapods: the springtails, proterans, and diplerans. Found in soil and leaf litter, these tiny creatures range from 1/50th of an inch to 1 1/4 inches in length. They are distinguished from insects by their mouth parts, which are fully tucked into the head. As in the most primitive insects, the silverfish and the bristletails, these tiny soil dwellers evolved from a wingless ancestor, and they continue to molt throughout their life. So, again, I mean, he talked about a lot of the biodiversity within the insect kingdom, and this is definitely something that should be studied, because it is a little bit unintuitive, right? You have your arthropods that the vast majority of them are insects, but some of them aren't. Primitive hexapods. The springtails that make up the class Collembola are named after a forked organ on the abdomen that can propel them up to 100 times their own body length. A quick way to escape danger. So that's an adaptive positive for that species. It'll probably be on the test. They are among the most abundant animals, with populations of 300 million individuals per acre in some grassland habitats. With a length of less than 1/12 of an inch, proterans are rarely seen and were not even discovered until 1907. They live in soil and leaf litter, where they feed on fungi and decaying matter. Alright, so springtails, underline, underline, underline. There's a lot about them here. But yeah, I mean, other than that, there's not much. It might be good for you to just review this page. I mean, this is going to be pretty intuitive for you, but just review different types and different visual characteristics that can lead you to various conclusions. His tests are known to be like logic puzzles, sort of. Because he wants to test like how you think. Do you think like a biologist? How was it? Okay. Yeah. You give me notes. Seriously, give me notes on how to better tutor, and I'll bring it next week. The exam's in 5 weeks, right? Yeah. You're gonna do great. You're preparing this early already. I mean, come on. Okay, well, let's get to work on English. This was awesome. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. But yeah, I can't wait to write that essay. Okay, bye. See you in a second.